Okay, so we are in this Wellbeing series, aren't we? It's so great to have all the young people with us. I'm so glad you're in for this sermon. I had checked with Brad if you were in, because I'm going to be talking to you quite a bit this morning. It applies to all of us old people as well, myself. But, so often the sermon's aimed at our age bracket, and they kind of get a little bit, if we can kind of, weave it in, its relevance to them. A lot of what I'm saying this morning, I'm going to be aiming at them, and it's good for us to hear, because we're all human beings, but I really want to encourage them as well. They are the next generation, and we want to really spur them on. So we say amen to that. Right. As you know, we're studying this book. Does anybody have it that they can kind of wave it? We're studying this book. Some of us are doing it in life groups. Some of us are doing it independently. Still encourage you to get hold of it. It's a 50-day devotional, and we're looking at well-being. What is God's plan for well-being? And Martin has talked to us about the concept of shalom. And what I understand by shalom is this: shalom, my peace. Do you remember that song? Who remembers that song? No, but I am the oldest person in here, clearly. Right, so I used to sing that when I first became a Christian, and so I've always associated that word with its traditional, well-known meaning, which is peace. But what it actually means is total harmony. Harmony in all areas of your life, harmony in your relationship with God, harmony in your relationship with others, and harmony in your relationship with yourself. And so we are looking at how can we journey with God to have a better harmony in ourself, in all areas of our lives. And Martin's given us this great screen grab here, which is about, it's a question really. It's a question to us. Empty, full. In the area of some aspects of our well-being that are categorized here, there are loads of different categories you could take, but we've just taken these 6. Where are you? Where am I? Physical well-being. Where would I be on that dial? Emotional well-being. Where would I be on that dial? And what we know about all of these aspects is they are all really, they synergize, they're symbiotic. And what we mean by that is they all affect each other. So if I am not feeling great emotionally, I'm not really given to doing much exercise. So that affects my physical well-being. And vice versa. Yes, if my physical well-being isn't great, then my emotional well-being is often pretty low. And I can tell you now, when Paul doesn't run, it's like living with, I don't even want to say what it's like living with, but it ain't great in our house. If he's got an injury and he can't run, it's true, isn't it, Matt? And so lots of this, if we're struggling at work, it affects our emotional well-being, it affects the way we relate to one another, it affects the way we are with God. All of these things affect one another, and therefore we don't look at them in isolation. But actually, you might be thinking to yourself that one of these stands out to you more than the others, or maybe a couple of them do. And today, we're looking at emotional well-being. What does it mean to be emotional? And I want to just talk about typicality. So if you're in the middle of a journey right now that's got either a great high or a great low, I want you to kind of think this morning about what's typical for you. In your emotional well-being radar, what's normal? Where's your emotional well-being sitting normally on a typical season, if there even is a typical season? So, God wants us to have shalom. He wants us to have harmony. And we are basing our season, this season, on the story of Elijah. It's a great story. Young people, if you don't know this story, I am telling you, read it and read it and read it, because it is a great story. It is the sort of stuff that movies are made out of. It is so awesome. So we're in 1 Kings 17, 18, and pushing into 19 today. I'm just going to summarize some aspects of the story for you, because we're not going to read it all. But Elijah did massive, mighty exploits for God. And here are a summary of some of them. He was fed by ravens when he didn't have, I'm quite tired, when he didn't have any food, right? He also went to the widow. She only had a bit of oil and she only had a bit of flour. And we hear this story a lot. And she fed him. She made him some food out of what she had, and then God just kept refilling those jars and kept feeding them. And we know that in our church finances. It's almost like we're always teaching on the reserves, and God has just kept providing for us, and the strategic prayer team gave us a word about that particular aspect of the story, and God has proved faithful to it. I mean, we're singing about God's faithfulness. We have seen it financially in the last 3 years here. We have. So Elijah has seen supernatural provision. He has seen resurrection. He has been used by God. The widow's son suddenly died. She was not happy. She was like, why have you brought this into our house? What has God done? He goes upstairs. The boy is resurrected by the power of God. And then he takes on like 450 false god worshippers, Baal worshippers. He takes them all on, head to head, just him versus them. 450, Elijah. And they each offer a sacrifice of a bull to God. He wets his just for good measure, makes sure it's dripping wet, and then fire from heaven comes down. It burns up Elijah's. God proves who he is, right? And then they all get killed. The enemy all get killed. So we are talking about mighty, massive things. And then after a massive season of drought, he kneels down and he prays several times over, and then a small cloud comes, and then an enormous rain cloud comes. He sees mighty, mighty things happen. He has absolute security in God, so you'd think, and he's got absolute confidence. And then we go into verse 19. Can we have that up, Keith, please? We're going to chapter 19, and we see this. He has a complete meltdown. Loses it. We don't know why. We don't know what triggers it. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe he's isolated. Maybe he's lost somebody close to him. Maybe he's just really frightened of Jezebel, and there's something spiritual going on there that we don't know, and we're not party to. But this is what happens. Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of those." What she means by that is, those 450 that are dead, I'm going to make you just like one of them. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to have you. That's what she's saying. And she says, and then it says, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. God has literally just consumed a bull with fire from heaven, and he's afraid. He has been miraculously provided for on 2 occasions at least that we know of that are recorded, and he has been used to resurrect a young man. And he is afraid when he is threatened. Elijah was afraid. He ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to the broom, I can't do that. And you know what I mean. And he sat under it and he prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors." And then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. He has a complete meltdown. He wants to chuck it all in. He wants to die. He wants it to be over. Can anybody identify with that? If you think back over the journey of your life, can anybody remember a time when they felt like that? Maybe more than one, maybe several. And it's amazing, isn't it? God, Martin talked to us about that this last week, where he said, an angel appears and feeds him and waters him and rests him twice over. And then travels a long distance. And then God appears to him, and by his grace calls him again, gives him a fresh set of instructions. This is what we're doing next. And then off they go together, and he serves God again. It is an amazing story of hope for us, and it's also an amazing it's an amazing encouragement to us. Doesn't seem like a strong enough word, because when we fall, it's not over. When we emotionally lose the plot, it's not over. God's like, it's okay. We can deal with this. I am with you. I'm still going to provide. I'm going to provide you with more food so you get another miracle. And then I'm going to come and talk to you. And then we're going to go on together. When you make a mistake, it's not over. When you lose it, it's not over. We are all given to emotional sways. We all are emotional beings. And it's interesting, isn't it? Elijah feels fear, possible desperation, anxiety, overwhelming distress. And when we look at the life of Jesus, when we look at who we are made in the image of, God in his form of a son, Jesus in the garden was overwhelmed to the point of death, where he wept and wept. And Jesus experienced anger in the temple. And, when he's challenging Peter about some of the things he's saying, could there possibly be some righteous anger in there too? We don't know it, but get thee behind me, Satan is a pretty strong expression, I think. He is moved with compassion to bring Lazarus back to life. He is an emotional well-being, and we are made in his image. And yet emotions have got a bit of a bad rap. Because, if you are brought up in a home where actually crying is a weakness and it's mocked, or if you are brought up, or you work in an environment where actually to be emotional is considered a weakness. When you're a woman, I can testify to this, when you're a woman in a world full of male leaders in a profession, you're often, and you're speaking passionately, you're often labeled as being emotional. That's not emotion. That's conviction. And let's be really honest as well, while we're doing this, that actually emotion and rationality are not mutually exclusive. You can be really passionate, convicted, emotional. We just call it different things, but they're really our feelings. All of those words talk about our feelings, what we are feeling. Jesus felt things deeply. God feels things deeply. We are made in his image. It is okay to be emotional. But some emotions are positive. Some emotions are negative. Anybody living with a tired teenager? Or actually a tired adult? I'll own up to that. If you're a tired adult, sometimes your emotions get the better of you, don't they? You can be short-tempered and irritable. You know what I mean? Or if you're under pressure. We are all emotional beings. And our emotions and our feelings affect our confidence, our boldness, our relationship, our approach to our jobs, our interactions with people, our interactions with our children, with our parents, our temper, our expression of love, our witness, our spiritual dial, our closeness to God. I could keep going for the rest of the day. They affect everything we touch. So, we are emotional beings. Sometimes we suppress them, but when we suppress our emotions, it has a very negative impact on our health. So the Harvard Medical School have researched and proven that suppression of your emotion can cause stomach ulcers, can cause illness, they can cause digestion difficulties, it can be a contributing factor to cancer, it can limit your life expectancy, it can cause headaches and migraines. God wants us to be emotionally well because it's in our interests. He wants us to be emotionally well. He wants shalom, where our emotion, our spirit, and all of our lives comes into wellness. So, we've all got positive emotions, haven't we? And those often come from the fruits of the Spirit. So we've got peace, joy, amusement, gladness. Yes, we felt that this morning. Who has felt the joy of the Lord in this place this morning? I have. Who's felt the peace of God this morning? I have. Who's felt the boldness of God this morning? I have. Because as we're singing those truths over ourselves, those things in our spirit, they rise up within us, don't they? But also, we can have some negative emotions, and short-term negative emotions are actually very helpful. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. So, fear. So, I'm going to tell you a story now. So, a few weeks ago, I was going somewhere, and the girls often come in and they help me choose what I'm going to wear, right? They help me choose what I'm going to wear because, quite frankly, they are just more stylistically okay than me. And so I trust their advice, trust their guidance. And so I'm trying stuff on, and we're in the room, and a hornet comes in through the window, and literally Charlotte is out of there. She's like, whoa, she's gone. She has gone. And about 30 seconds later, she comes back like this. She literally comes in with a duvet. It's over her head, right? You can about see this much of her. It's wrapped around her whole body, and she's like this. Watch, it was so funny. We were cracking up. This hornet was massive. I'm not underplaying Charlotte. It was something else, wasn't it? It was massive. Anyway, in that example, fear is okay, isn't it, right? It's a healthy reaction to something that's dangerous. I am really clumsy. I knock glasses over and coffee cups over, and I fall a lot. I'm not great. And I do not like to walk near a cliff edge. I do not, because I'm frightened that I am going to fall. I don't think actually that's fear. I think that's wisdom. But a few years ago, we were on holiday, weren't we, son? And Paul and Steve had scoped out, this isn't in my notes, I'm really digressing now. Paul and Steve had scoped out this walk, hadn't they? They were like, this is going to be fine. Sonia was crying, I was raging. We had to hold on to this cliff edge. As we're walking around this cliff, we've got the children with us. What are we doing here? It was like that. Man, all of the emotions were right there in that moment. It was there. It was an emotional moment, wasn't it? I was upset. Sonia was really upset, weren't you, son? Steve was like, sorry. It was so funny. The kids loved it, yeah. But, in that instance, fear, when you are on a cliff edge, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. But negative emotions, when you have them for a long period of time, are incredibly damaging to us. So short-term negative emotions that are beneficial, fine. Long-term negative emotions are incredibly damaging. They rob you of your peace. You carry them around like hidden suitcases of baggage. Things that are said to you when you're a child. Rejection that's happened. People that have hurt you in relationships. Experiences that you had. You carry them around, and they're like, I tried to get a picture, but I couldn't find one. If you imagine somebody who's just carrying literally suitcase after suitcase after suitcase after suitcase on their back to the point where they're kind of walking like this. That's what negative emotion does to us. And it is not God's plan for us to be in that. Right? I'm deviating a little bit from the book, by the way. But Martin's already talked about gratitude, so that's okay, because that's one of the things the book tells us to have. So I just want to come now with some truth. Young people, okay? Learn this when you're young, because God and you can change your thinking. We're all coming to it a bit older, but learn this when you're young. God can change your thinking if you let him and you work with him on that. Okay? So think about the things that you are struggling with emotionally. Let's all think of one. Have a little think about something that you're struggling with emotionally. Just keep that in your mind. And then I'm going to talk now about what we can do to deal with that particular thing. So, God doesn't want us to have an Elijah meltdown. He wants us to have shalom. And that's what we're talking about now. So, what can we do to increase our emotional wellness? Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Sounds simple. What does it mean? Okay, how do we get it? Well, I can honestly testify I have done this. In the last decade, there are certain things, and I am really grateful to Martin and Sarah for leading us as a church, because through his ministry and through deep conversations with people like Karen and Rachel Griffiths, certain things that have held me for a long time, I am free of. I'm telling you now, I am free of them. And that's not me, I'm not bigging myself up here, but I am saying imitate me as I imitate Christ, because you don't have to be bound by the things that limit you and limit your emotional wellness. Okay? It is possible. So do not conform, but be transformed. Be transformed. So I've got 4 short things to say about this. Number 1, identify. So, what grinds your gears? Oh, Rose over there. What does your head in? What are the things that put you in a position where you get really wound up or where you react? Because for young people, managing that reaction is kind of a journey that you go on with God where you learn how to do that. But what is it that triggers you? And when you are triggered, what does that look like in your body? What do you do? Does your heart race? Do you come out fighting? Do you, thank you, Jacob, do you come out fighting? Do you run like Elijah? Do you bolt and say, I'm out of here, I'm giving up? What is it that you do? Learn who you are, identify what sets you off, right? And that's for all of us. We probably know that if we're reflective people. We probably know what our triggers are. Is it mates putting you down? And I'm just being real here. Is it your parents telling you what to do? Is it your sports team losing? Bit slow there, mate. Paul's not in the room, so I've got to go somewhere. Is it road rage? Is it something complex? Is it something in your history? Is there something that happened to you when you were younger, and then when you see that or something else layers up on top of that, it brings it out of you? Is it a memory of a hurt you can't shake and you struggle to forgive? What is it that grinds your gears and sets you off and puts you emotionally, sends your dial in the wrong direction? Identify what it is. Are you thinking of something? Waiting for your nod. Lovely. Right. I want to say here, there is no guilt in life. There is no guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. We are not ashamed of that emotion. We are not ashamed of that emotion because we are actively seeking God's help in doing something about it. So we are not bound by fear. We do not hide when we have an emotional reaction that is unhealthy. Right? We're not embarrassed about it. We've all been there. So let's just drop it. We drop the facade. We've all been there. Some people get frustration and they just they will consider themselves to be less emotional than others. But they still experience frustration. They still experience anger. They still experience apathy. Apathy is something you feel. Okay. Elijah ran and hid. We don't know what triggered him, but we just know that his reaction was to run and want to give up. What is your typical reaction? Identify. Know yourself. If you know yourself, you can do something about it. Number 2, slow yourself down. Put the brakes on. Put your reaction on pause. Craig Groeschel says this: you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your reaction to it. Self-control. Fruit of the Spirit. Be still and know that I am God. Proverbs 4:23. Guard your heart, it is the wellspring of life. Slow yourself down. Proverbs 13:3. Those who guard their lips preserve their life, but those who speak rashly come to ruin. Ecclesiastes 7:9. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. The Bible tells us time and time and time again to guard against being reactionary, to reacting quickly in the moment. And again, Martin and Sarah are both amazing at this. I sometimes look at them in awe thinking, why aren't you losing it right now? But they don't ever do that, not even behind the scenes. And, it is achievable, and not just because of personality, but because of Jesus. Okay. We identify what are your triggers. Is it when your mum and dad come up to you and they're like, do this, you haven't done that, you haven't done this? Or is it when somebody else in school insults you, winds you up, makes a sarcastic remark that undermines you and humiliates you? What is it that sets you off? And when that happens, right, what do? Slow yourself right down. And again, this is a word, sorry for the young people. Okay. This is the thing. Mind your physical reaction. So, your eyes tell 1,000 words. And with your eyes, you can cut somebody right down in that moment. You can react so quickly in a harsh, unloving, vengeful way. Your eyes can say it all. It's true, isn't it, Mads? Sometimes, Mads and I, actually don't know I'm going to say this. Sometimes Mads and I have this little thing where Mads will look at me. Because, when we grow up, right, we have to become independent. And to become independent, we have to actually butt heads with our parents, which means that sometimes we say stuff just because we want to become independent. And Mads will say something, and her eyes will say it. You know what I mean? We've all been there, right? Her eyes will say it, and I'll be going, do you want to wind that back up like 20 seconds, and let's change this, and it's all going to be fine. It's so funny, isn't it? Happens all the time. It's great. It did to me as well, though, when I was your age, so I don't mind it. I've just got to not react in my emotional dial. Okay, so in that moment, you're slowing yourself down. Breathe in, breathe out, and be still. And wait for the Lord. Breathe in, breathe out, and be still. You know, in that moment when something's really pushing your buttons, think of the blessing song. He is for you. He is for you. When that colleague at work is doing something that totally gets on your nerves, he is for you. When somebody says something that just pushes your buttons, he is for you. Just think of him in that moment. Slow yourself right down. Slow your reactions down. Center on who God is and get his perspective. And then capture. This is, we should be just have gone through slow and on capture. Are we stuck? Okay, I'll keep going. So what you should have on the screen is a picture of a lasso and a picture of a runaway train. And 2 Corinthians 10 says this: the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds, arguments, and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and we make it obedient to Christ. A vengeful reaction to somebody who's insulting you is not Christ-like. We take hold of that reaction, that instinct, and we capture that thought and we make it submissive to Christ. We do have the power to do this, and this is the thing. Sometimes people are like, oh, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. The hard reality is, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And that's really hard. Because it's hard, isn't it? You just feel like you can't. In that moment when everything's like, but you can. You can control everything you say and everything you do. You can control everything you say and everything you do. So, before we think about this, I just want to share it. I was listening to a Glyn Barrett sermon the other day on Friday morning, and he said this: your mind leads you to your most dominant thought. And I thought that was amazing because I'd already had this kind of image of this runaway train, and God had kind of been stirring in me that you can either capture it and contain it, or you can let it run away and you can hop on there. So it can either run away from your control, you can feed that little beast that's stirring there, and you can keep, and your emotional well-being dial's going dump, 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 empty, or you can hold it in, you can slow it down, you can capture it, keep hold of it. And how you handle that is about your presence of mind, your walk with Jesus, your closeness with Jesus, and it's also about how much time you're giving to Jesus. And I'm going to talk about that now. But when I was ill, right, and those thoughts came to me that made my emotional well-being, my shalom, move in this direction, and I was not invincible to them. So I had moments where Paul and the kids would be playing a game, and I'd be like, if I don't survive, they're going to have a lifetime of that, and I'm going to miss out. I remember once lying on the sofa. I was on like round 4 of chemo, I think, and I was lying there, and they were playing a game in the kitchen, and I was in the living room in our old house, and we've got doors in between the two that double open. And I heard them all laughing and giggling, and my heart was breaking because I was thinking, man, they're going to have so much joy, and I'm going to have joy in heaven, but I'll miss them so much, right, in those moments. But I dealt with it like this, and I believe this is what God is speaking to us now about capturing. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Can cancer stop him? No. Can chemotherapy stop him? No. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. All manner of things will be well over me. I stood, I sung, and I didn't ignore those feelings. I acknowledged them, but I wrapped them around with the truth of God. And actually, I remember one day I'd dropped the kids off at school. It was raining. I was driving down the hill to our old house. And I remember the enemy's such a subtle whisperer. I remember this word coming to me that was like, oh, how many more times will you get to do this? And I'm driving down that hill. And I'm in my car, and I kid you not, I'm like that. Who can stop the Lord? I'm like that. As I was shouting it out. I was singing it so loud because that is the truth. That is the truth. That is the whole truth. I might have gone to heaven. But that was not out of God's control for my life. And that is the full truth right there. And so capture it. Don't let your mind run away. I could have kept thinking over that for 2 hours that morning, or I could have applied something else from God to it. And that's what I chose to do. It's hard. I had to practice it, and I had loads of encouragement. I had loads of people sending me scriptures. I had loads of people, praying for me. And I'm sure all of that prayer and all of that encouragement enabled me and supported me in a position to where I could do that with Jesus. Yeah? So I didn't do it alone. It's not me anyway. It's God, isn't it? But the last one, before we stop, is apply. So we've got identify. What happens to you when something really gets on your nerves and starts to push your buttons and your dial starts to go the wrong way? And then we've got slow yourself down. Then we've got capture that thought. And now we've got apply the power. Hebrews 4:12 says this: the word of God is active, alive, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joint and marrow. It judges the thoughts and the attitudes of the heart. The Bible has the power to change your thinking if you meditate on it. It can free you from emotional baggage that you have carried for years, or even for months or weeks. It can free you from it. The Word of God has power within it. It is active. It is alive. It separates lies from truth. And it's so important, isn't it? I was really challenged by this the other day. I do make time during the day to read my Bible, right? But I also make time for Instagram and Twitter. And this is the thing, you lovely young people, right? The enemy wants you TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter when you're lying in bed in the morning. That's what he wants. Because he knows while you're doing that, you're not powering up for the day. That's what he knows. And God has got so many great plans for you. He has got great, great plans for you. He loves you all intimately. He knows you all intimately. He's got great things in store for you. But your emotional roller coaster will go the wrong way if you allow that distraction to come into your life and to be the dominant line. So when Glyn Parrott says, your mind leads you to the most dominant thought, what are you filling your mind with when you wake up in the morning? And actually, this is for all of us, to be honest, because, it can happen to all of us. We all like a bit of a scroll. Maybe not the people who don't have phones, but we've just got to be realistic. Young people, the devil wants to stop you from being active in his kingdom, from fulfilling every plan that God's got for you, and that is a distraction because it feeds often the wrong stuff. It feeds self-image. It feeds, your thinking about stuff that's not God-focused. He's got so much for you. He is so for you. So, powerful word. Apply it. God is so gracious, isn't it? So gracious. If we have a negative emotional day and our emotional well-being just wanes and we just spend 2 hours whirling around the wrong thing in our brains, God is so gracious. With Elijah, I want to die, I want to give up. And what happens? An angel comes. An angel feeds him. An angel ministers to him. He rests. For 2 days, he sleeps. Eats and sleeps. That's all he does. And then he goes to God, and then God appears. Even when we cock it up royally, God always reaches out to us. He never, ever gives up on us. Ever. And actually, we're never going to be the finished article. So we can release ourselves from the pressure of having to get this right all the time. But we can go on a journey where we can break some of the things that have been said to us, some of the things that are already starting to give us difficulties. We can break some of those things and they cannot hold us back any longer. God is the giver of freedom. He is the giver of freedom.